Star Wars Shatterpoint is a head-to-head skirmish game. Players build teams of iconic characters from across the Star Wars universe and pit them against each other in order to complete a series of struggles. I'm Matt with Bowles, and this is everything you'll need to know to get started playing Star Wars Shatterpoint. Every game of Star Wars Shatterpoint has a mission that dictates the general structure of the game through specific objectives and special rules. Players each build teams of iconic characters from across the Star Wars universe, and pit them against each other in an order to complete a mission. The mission will detail any special rules and how they change with each struggle. A struggle is basically the phase of the mission. Once a struggle is completed, the next one begins. The mission card itself will note where the objective markers are to be placed on the map, but the struggle cards each indicate which objective markers are active and which are inactive during that struggle. However, the active objectives of the mission will shift each time a struggle is completed, keeping the game fluid and dynamic. And then, the first player to win 2 struggles is the winner of the game. Sounds simple enough, but the struggle tracker is how players keep track of who is winning the struggle. At the beginning of each struggle, the struggle token is placed in the center space of the tracker, with each end of the tracker belonging to one player or the other. As the game progresses, various effects will move the struggle token towards one player or the other, or players will be able to gain momentum tokens to add onto their end of the struggle tracker. As soon as the struggle token would move into a space occupied by a player's momentum token, that player wins the struggle. So players want to both attempt to move the struggle token closer to themselves by holding objectives, but they also want to gain momentum, which they do by wounding enemy units or when the struggle token is in the center or on the opponent's side of the struggle tracker. This balancing mechanic helps games of Shatterpoint keep from being too one-sided. In Star Wars Shatterpoint, each player brings their strike team to the game, and each strike team are made up of units. A unit can be a single named character, or can be a small group of similar individuals, like clone troopers, for example. Every unit has a stat card packed with information on both sides. On this side is listed the unit's name, their unique name, type, and number of characters in the unit, as well as their points cost, era, and force score. The amount of force a unit has will contribute to the total number of force tokens a player starts the game with, which we'll get to a bit later. A unit's unique name, type, points cost, and era are all important while constructing a strike team, but is outside the scope of this video. If you'd like us to make a video on how all that works, let us know down in the comments. On the reverse side of the unit card is the unit's abilities, stamina, and durability. Also their tags, which can be referred to from specific rules and abilities throughout the game. Unit abilities each have an icon indicating when and how they can be used. Active abilities can only be used during that unit's activation. If the ability begins with action followed by a colon, then the unit must spend its action in order to perform that ability. Reactive abilities occur in response to some other event, and will note when they can be used. Each player can only use one reaction per triggering event, so if you have multiple, choose wisely. Innate abilities are always in effect, and some units will have different flavors of innate ability, like tactic ability, which allow units to work together in some capacity, or identity abilities, which are unique to primary units and usually have a pretty strong effect if you can trigger them. An important thing to keep in mind with abilities is their force cost. Active and reactive abilities always have a force cost, as noted by the icons here. In order to use a force ability, the controlling player must spend enough force tokens, like we mentioned earlier. Force tokens are gained at the start of the game by adding up the total number of force from all units in the strike team. When a force token is used, it is flipped from its ready side to its spent side, until a rule or effect allows a player to refresh force, where they will flip it back to its ready side. On any player's turn, they start by drawing the top card of their order deck. Their order deck is made up of one card from each unit on their strike team and one Shatterpoint card. When a player starts their turn, they draw the top card of their order deck to determine which unit they will activate on this turn. If they draw a Shatterpoint card, it acts as a wild card, and the player can choose which of their units to activate. However, a player can always opt to spend one force to reserve a unit card and set it off to the side. On any subsequent turn, that player may choose to instead use the reserved card instead of drawing from the order deck to determine which unit will get activated on that turn. Now that you've got your order card, that unit takes its activation. When a unit activates, they may take 2 actions, including move, focus, combat, ability, recover, or take cover. When a unit moves, it uses the advance or dash tool to measure the range at which they can move. The tool is placed in contact with the unit's base, then the unit can move to any spot on the same elevation while they remain in contact with the movement tool. Now let's get to the best part of any skirmish game, combat. Combat in Star Wars Shatterpoint is, on its own, very straightforward. However, there are a lot of options and tactics built into the system which offer a lot of ways to engage the enemy, which we'll get to in a second. For now, the basics of combat in Shatterpoint rely on attack and defense stats. Every unit has a stance card, which outlines a lot of their combat abilities. On a unit's stance card, you'll find their melee and ranged stats. The top number indicates how many attack dice the unit rolls when making that type of attack, and the bottom number indicates the number of defense dice they get when defending against that type of attack. So for example, Ahsoka doesn't have a ranged weapon, so she gets no dice when making a ranged attack that she can't make because she doesn't have a weapon for it. When a unit attacks another, they roll as many attack dice as is noted on the appropriate attack stat, and the defending unit rolls their defense dice. The attack die can land on critical, strike, expertise, or failure, and the defense die can land on block, expertise, or failure. A failure result on either die just means nothing happened, and expertise we'll get to in a little bit, but for an attacker to land a hit, they need unblocked strikes. A strike roll is considered a success on the attack roll. However, every block result on the defense die will cancel out one such success, but a block result cannot cancel a critical result. Along the bottom of the unit's stance card is their expertise charts. Players will use these charts to determine the outcome when rolling expertise on attack or defense die. When making an attack or defense roll, the player counts how many expertise icons were rolled, then references that unit's expertise chart. For example, let's say Ahsoka rolls 3 defense expertise on a defense roll. Referencing her expertise chart, this means that in addition to whatever else she rolled on the defense roll, she also gains 2 additional blocks, and can downgrade a crit to a normal strike, and finally is allowed a jump maneuver after all damage has been resolved. If she had rolled 1 additional expertise, she would also have been allowed to heal. The last part of a unit's stance card is their combat tree. This chart is used to determine the outcome of any successful strike, or strikes. Anytime a unit performs an attack roll, for each success after blocks have been resolved, the attacking player references the combat tree and can apply any listed effects, starting from the left and moving right for each unblocked attack. This can be either straight damage, or status effects like disarmed or pinned, or potentially even moving units around to gain better positioning. Each time a unit takes damage, a damage token is added to its unit card. As soon as that unit has as many damage tokens as their stamina, they become wounded, which, remember, adds momentum to the enemy. Wounded units don't contest objectives and can't have any additional damage applied to them, and must also spend additional force if they want to use any abilities. At the beginning of a wounded unit's activation, they flip the wounded token to injured. Injured units must still spend additional force to use their force abilities, but if a unit becomes injured as many times as their durability, then they are defeated and removed from play. And that's all there is about the basics of combat in Shatterpoint. There are a lot of other mechanics you'll need to know before becoming an expert in Star Wars Shatterpoint. Things like line of sight, deployment setup, hunkering and cover, and priority objectives. But hopefully this was enough to get you started. It's a great game with a lot of options utilizing different strategies and techniques. If you're looking for a quick-to-learn skirmish game with a ton of depth, you'll definitely want to check out Star Wars Shatterpoint. If this video was at all helpful, please consider giving it a like, and consider subscribing for more tabletop gaming news. Again, I am Matt with Bowles. Thanks for watching. Bye.